Your birth order determines your life and your parenting. Maybe you're a firstborn and you feel like you always need to achieve something. Or you're a youngest and you found it so hard to watch all the older siblings to have all these privileges before you. Or maybe you're a middle child like me and you formed a belief that your contribution doesn't matter. And I am standing here to share with you that our perception and our beliefs are always possible to be changed. This is the second part of my birth order and sibling dynamics, and in this one you will hear about the tendencies and how it's not so much about the chronological birth order, but about the decisions we make. We also talk about blended families and what the gap means. My name is Annette and I created this Effortless Parenting podcast because I believe that you deserve a calmer home. I guide parents to embrace boundaries with strong-willed and highly sensitive children so they still feel loved and can cherish a bond for life. Enjoy the show. Sticking with the birth order, did you ever observe that like an eldest, a middle child, or a youngest has a tendency, I'm just making this up, but maybe does an eldest, are they maybe more to the superiority side and a second born to control, or is that not really there and we can talk about something else when it comes to birth order?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It depends on the decisions the child made and the circumstances, the family dynamics, the family values, all of those things that you know about, the atmosphere. What was the atmosphere? How did they feel within the atmosphere? How did they see themselves? So there are not necessarily tendencies that an oldest will be into superiority. That happens to be mine. And there are other reasons to just being an eldest. There are other reasons for that.
What do you mean other reasons?
Example, some interactions with my parents, with my mother in particular.
Okay, right. That's what you mean. Okay.
There's the early memories that went back to childhood, things around school, around being, you should know better, so that led me to strive to be better, to be more, to find value through being the best or better.
Right. Yeah.
Some of those were not cause, but there were decisions I made when, I remember being told that 99% in a test was not enough. Mm-hmm. When are you going to get 100? So what decisions did I make then? I could say, well, okay, I need to get 110 to get my mother's approval, or I'm just going to stop trying.
Yes. And what did you choose, Elaine?
Guess what? Chose the 110. And they're all hard. All the impasses are hard, but yes,
they are.
So yeah, we make decisions. It's not a cause and effect.
Yes, that's right. That's the difference, right, with Adler, and that it's goal driven. And we look at what is that question you always ask, Elaine, to help us with the goal?
What's the purpose? What's the purpose of this behaviour? What's the purpose of this healing? Right. What's the purpose of this illness? What is it doing for me? How am I? Because there is some reason. It's that mistaken goal of Dreykus. He described the mistaken goal. How is that helping me?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hold that thought of the mistaken goal and Dreykus. I do need to open the door for the cat and the mistakes. I forgot to leave the door and the window open for him to go out. Yeah, I would like to talk about the purpose a little bit, the purpose of our behavior.
It's all subjective. It's not objective. And if you do this, therefore that will happen. It's not. It's if I think this, my own interpretation, my own meaning will be put onto events, to atmospheres, to feelings. Right. And the child does that very, very early on.
Mm-hmm. Their own interpretation of this person does that, and therefore I must, to belong here. I would like to go back into birth order with you, Elaine, and you being a firstborn, I am the secondborn, so I have an older sister, 5 years older, a younger brother, 5 years younger. And so I'd like to share a little bit with parents how it helps them. You know, every parent came somewhere in the birth order, even if they're an only child. And when I do these activities with parents, what I do in my courses is I get like a group of eldest together in a group, and the only children in that group, and the middle and the youngest. And it is fascinating. Parents love that when they find out a little bit more about themselves, you know. And you've probably done something similar. And isn't it just, it's such a revelation for like eldest in a group to hear that they were all very similar, not to stereotype, but an eldest child, you know, their parents were first-time parents, and they had to be the first ones to try and go to the disco at a certain age, you know, and they always share that, and how they found it maybe unfair that the younger didn't have to fight so hard. And every child and every group then has their experiences. The middle children tend to say, well, we became very independent. That was a good thing, you know. We weren't maybe raised as conservative, and so we could go on and on about this, about the youngest being called the baby when they walk into a family gathering at the age of 40, right? What do you share with parents, you know, how it helps them to on the one hand get some knowledge about those stereotypes, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the birth order traits or the descriptions of each birth position are more tendencies,
yes,
rather, or choices, or preferences, not necessarily this is what a firstborn will be like, or this is what a middle child will be like, but they are possibilities. So they're not set in stone. And one thing to say really is that Adler emphasized what he called the psychological birth order, which is not the same as a chronological birth order.
Right.
So the chronological is the dates. So I was born in 1957, my sister was born in 1958, my other sister in 1960. That's the chronological. But the psychological is how I see myself. So do I see myself as an eldest? So there are children, for example, I've worked with you know, in therapy with adults or children who have said they might be second born, but they've had to take up the role of the eldest because the eldest didn't want to do it, or the eldest maybe had been ill or died. So I've had to step up. So my place, my birth order can change. My perception of my birth order can change. Right. So the chronological doesn't change, but my perception and how I carry out, if you like, the position can be different. So there are tendencies, and I'll just run through a couple if it's helpful.
Oh, thank you.
The birth positions. So the firstborn child, as you said so well, they're given you know, they're the practice child. The parents are having a go. They're trying. They've never done this before, and you know, they're learning. But also all the attention is focused on that first child because it's the miracle child. Oh my goodness me, look at this. Look at what we've done here. Oh, wow, there's this baby, and oh, goo, it can speak and it can crawl, and isn't it wonderful? So the child has got all of that coming its way. And then when the second child comes along, the first child is dethroned. And I think that's such a powerful word. So I'm not on the throne. I'm not on that pedestal anymore. I'm not in the spotlight. I just think of it, I like to think of it as a spotlight. The spotlight has gone over there. So I'm sat here on my own in the dark. And all the attention now is going to that second miracle child. Yeah. So I feel dethroned. So my response to that might be that I have to constantly be ahead. I am a step ahead. And the second child might well feel they are trying to catch up. So the second child might never catch up because there is an age difference. The firstborn has had all those experiences, has had, you know, and so the second child is running to catch up. The first child is watching its back, is going, oh God, where is that child? It's horrible. I hate it. You know, go away. So, or maybe, oh, I love you. It's so nice to have a little. It's so lovely to have a little brother or sister. You know, it could be all kinds of responses. And the second child doesn't. So very often becomes quite ambitious because they're overstretching themselves. They want to catch up. They want to be better than the first child because they know that being that bit older gets some kind of kudos. So possibly they struggle to be equal to the older child. Then maybe another child comes along, a third child. So the second child then becomes a middle child. Do you see how it changes? So then suddenly I'm in the middle, and the attention was, well, not on me anymore. It's on that younger one, but I'm between. So somebody's chasing and snapping at my heels, but also I'm snapping at somebody else's heels. So middle children often feel really that they don't have a place. Sometimes they feel invisible. Sometimes they think, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. How do I get recognition? Sometimes they might just give up. They might just say, oh, well, there's no point in trying because he's way ahead of me and she's snapping at my heels, so I'll just sit here and wait and see what happens. So, it varies massively. The other thing that is often said about middle children is that they are very often peacekeepers. Yes, they're mediators. They want things to be to go well. They want to try and fit in. They want to belong. They might be very sensitive to justice. It's unfair. He's so much better than me, and what about justice? We should all be the same. This is not right. So you can see those different choices that children might make. And then the youngest. So the youngest child will never be dethroned.
I've never heard that sentence put like that. It's so true. Never be dethroned.
There's nobody coming to snap at my heels. So it's just me. And so very often the younger child will be babied by the other people, by the other children, by the parents. You can't possibly do this. They might be pampered. They might be spoiled. We don't expect much of you because you're so little. You can't really do very much. But also they might just also decide for themselves they're not capable, they can't do any of it. So not only do other people think that, but maybe they begin to believe that. So it's interesting with younger children, but it's not set in stone. I'm thinking my own family. My youngest brother, who's 9 years younger than me, he's a director of a charity that looks after children, not adoption and fostering charity.
Right.
And they run children's homes and all of that. And he's incredibly wanting people, to thrive and to become themselves. And he really gets that sense of having to look around and there's lots of other people. So he really gets that.
And did he say he's the youngest?
He's the youngest. He's 9 years younger than me. Yeah. So he's really built something. But initially, it took him a while to find his path. Yes. Because he was quite happy. He was a DJ when he was a teenager. He was just quite happy going and playing records and records in the old days. Quite happy. So,
very fun-loving, aren't they? The youngest, I always say, were quite fun-loving, charming. Were risk-takers.
Absolutely. So, but he's now very, very social. He coaches in football. He used to love playing football. So, he loved being a goalie, being the one that really kind of wanted to be. He was the goalie. He could save things, so it's really interesting. So it's very, very fascinating. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was a couple of things. One about blended families.
Very, very, yeah.
So I see and have seen, especially when I was working in school, that children were quite, I wouldn't say damaged, but challenged by becoming part of a blended family. So if you imagine somebody's the youngest, and then another family comes along where the child is also a youngest, or might even be younger than that child. Everything changes. The whole dynamic changes. Somebody might have been an eldest and had a certain amount of power in a way, and kudos and responsibility. Somebody else comes in that's older than them, or that's also an eldest, but maybe even younger than them. It does people's head in. They can't So unless it's handled very well by the parents and the children are allowed to find their place naturally, it's a very, very tough thing. The majority, I would say, of children that I worked with in school, most of them were from blended families.
Wow.
That caused them difficulties. Yeah. And then the mother doesn't love me anymore, or the father, he's not my dad, he shouldn't be telling me what to do, and you're not my mum. And they might get on very well with their foster or their step siblings, but they might not. And also the relationships might change several times in a child's early life. So they have to constantly be adapting, and so they feel very uncertain, very insecure quite often. Or they go into complete digging their heels in, and no way, you can get lost, you're not going to tell me what to do. So again, it's that subjective response to the situation that's interesting, and how they find a way to handle themselves. And the other thing I was going to touch on was gaps in families, which are also important, because what can happen is that you create a new birth order. So I was just thinking about what you were saying about being the middle child, 5 years older and 5 years younger. So Adler said that if there was a 5 or more age gap, that you effectively are in a different birth order. So it could be that each of you could saw themselves as an only, for example.
Interesting.
Yeah. Or you say you're a middle child, that's your perception of it. Yeah. But in another family with those gaps, they might each say, well, I didn't really have anything, because when I was born, they were off at school. So I had my parents all to myself as a middle child. And then when I went to school, the younger child was born. So that child had the parents all to themselves during school hours, obviously. So it's just fascinating how it's our own perception of the situation that is to be listened to, rather than saying you are a middle child, therefore. It's not that at all. It's how you saw yourself. That is, when I heard this for the first time last 2 years now, early 2025 recording this, I found that so fascinating. And not only for me did I question, am I a middle child, or am I maybe looking at myself like an eldest to my younger sibling? It opened my eyes parenting my own children, because my daughter, she's so interested in this, she's now 14, and I shared that with her, that it's not just the chronological, it's the psychological. And then we discovered that I have 2 children, could she maybe have seen herself as an only child, even though she has a younger brother? And she thought that was so fascinating, because at her young age, she was able to see that there were these tendencies. And it's almost like, I don't know if the term spitting in someone's soup fits here, but something changed since she had that awareness. And I have a feeling that my 2 children are becoming a little bit closer since then, her learning this. What do you think? Well, yes. I mean, people, like we've been saying, people can change their perception depending on what they're experiencing and feeling. So, I'm an eldest. I'm actually the eldest in my entire family on my mother's side, because there are no older people left. It's just me. I'm the eldest of them all, which is quite an interesting thought. It doesn't sit with me very often, but occasionally I think, oh my goodness me, there's nobody above me, there's nobody older. And I suppose I could start thinking of myself as a matriarch or something like that, but I don't feel it in myself. I just feel the same as I always felt. But also thinking about those groupings in families, so using my own family as a sibling group as an example. So 3 girls came very quickly, one after the other, 18 months between each of us. So 3 years between me and my younger sister, 18 months between me and my middle sister. Then there was a gap of 4 years. And my first brother was born when I was 7. And my second brother was born when I was 9. So the 2 boys have just a 2-year gap between them. But there is that gap in between. And so my first brother, the oldest of my 2 brothers, I think sees himself as, the head of the family. because he's the
Right.
oldest boy.
Yeah.
He's the oldest boy. You know, and my younger sister could see herself as a youngest of that group,
Yes.
or as a middle child.
Yeah. Have you ever asked?
Not recently, no, but there are 3 middle children. So I'm the eldest and my brother's the youngest. And then there are 3 middle children, but they could see themselves as not necessarily middle children. They could be a youngest or an eldest of that in between. So the eldest of the 2 boys, the youngest of the girls. The youngest boy is the youngest of us all. I'm the eldest of everyone. So it's just really interesting how people might change or wish to explore things differently rather than chronologically.
Yeah, it is so helpful, isn't it? To look into.
Amazing, yeah.
It is amazing. And I remember the nights when I had the parenting courses still in my home here. It was, parents never wanted to leave. There is so much to talk about. They could sit all night, right? And
yes.
Explore those dynamics, and it is so interesting. And on that topic, I wonder if this, before I ask my last question, I want to invite the parent who watches this and caregivers to leave us a comment, you know, below, to see maybe what you, the parent who sees this, observed, what beliefs you formed about your position in that birth order, or maybe about your own children, and let us know, or even questions that come up. You know, I'd love to explore that deeper. There's so much to say.
I was just also thinking that in terms of working with parents is the parent's own birth order and the impact that has on them as a parent in relationships. So if you have a parent who was an only growing up, and they have an only child, how is that dynamic? Or if it's a parent who grew up as an only, suddenly has lots of children, or 2 or more, you know, how is it to be a parent who was an only? How do you understand those dynamics? If you're a parent who was an eldest, and how do you relate to your eldest child?
Absolutely.
Was it the same or was it different? As an eldest, how do you relate to your youngest child? Or as an eldest, how do you relate to your only child? These are all dynamics that I think are worth looking at.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's so subtle, isn't it? And that's what then children tend to point out. You know, you're like this and this with them, and then the parent becomes maybe aware. Well, because I was the baby in the family, and you know, yeah, so fascinating. Yeah.
Yes, it's endlessly fascinating. And if I was the baby in my family, how do I step up to be a parent, to take that responsibility? You know, and onlys may be very social. Onlys may have lots of cousins and friends, and they may find a place within a group, or they may be on their own and they rule the roost. You know, I have clients who are onlys who are absolutely unaware of other people and not interested in other people.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing. So it's so subjective. It's all the time. It's how am I seeing this? And what can I do about this?
Yes, that's right. That's this whole, how did you say earlier? I didn't write it down, but we can change our perspective. And that's the beauty, isn't it? In this part 2, Elaine invited us to the question, how do you see yourself in your birth order, and what can you do about it? In part 3 of our conversation, we will go into why siblings fight and what you can do as a parent so they can get along and respect each other. I'm going to leave this right here. Thank you for watching and enjoy this next part.